lots more about that. Today, our Webversation is really intended to be an opportunity to give all of you the time to share, to do some asking of questions, and for us to offer some perspective. And we're going to do that a couple of different ways. One is a number of you sent us questions in advance through the surveys, the feedback surveys that you filled out. So thank you for doing that. And we have assembled those questions and are going to talk through them one at a time, and also to ask you for your input as we go. We're also going to open up for some questions that you might have, which we will be doing towards the latter part of our session today. So if you do have questions as we go, you can either share them in the chat box and we'll note them, either call on you as we go or towards the end of our session today. So with that, a couple of things I'd like to do that are more housekeeping related. One is, for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to today's Webversation, half webinar and half conversation, or I guess we're combining the two. I would also like to just acknowledge our colleagues and partners from the Patterson Foundation, Deborah Jacobs, CEO, Michael Corley, Senior Consultant for Administration. I saw he just waved. We have with us as well Abby Rolland, who is a TPF Fellow, Josephine Eisenberg, who you can see waving, and we do thank Josephine immensely for all of her coordination and help in keeping us moving. Also, just to introduce my partner in crime, Larry Clark. He'll wave and you'll hear from him in a moment. And again, my name is Michael Oxman, managing partner and principal in No Margin, No Mission, a consulting practice that helps nonprofits be more thrivable. Why are we here today? Well, today is a continuation of where we left off last week. For those of you who joined us during the webinar number 1, to learn about how to make decisions within your organization that can be mission-centric and economically informed. So a way to strengthen your strategic decision-making within your organizations. So advancing mission thrivability, AMT, is all about that. So 2 webinars, 2 Webversations. Today is the opportunity to continue the conversation, and we do want to hear from folks who are here with us. I'm going to turn it over to Abby Rolland just for a couple of minutes to share a couple of Zoom housekeeping thoughts and pointers. So Abby?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So nice to see everyone. You're probably all Zoom pros at this point, but just to go over a couple of things quickly, please, if you're not talking, put yourself on mute. We appreciate that, just so we don't get any background noise or things going on in the background. It just helps with listening and talking. If you're able to, please change your name on Zoom to your first and last name and your organization. So the way you do that is you can scroll over your photo, click on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. I'll follow along and do it as well. And then there should be a drop-down menu with, I think rename is like the 4th or 5th option. And so that'll give you a chance to enter a new name. So just your first and last name and organization. And that way we're able to identify everyone. So hopefully you can just see mine. Great, I see a couple people doing it. If you have questions about that, post them in the chat and we'll respond directly to you. Again, as Mike said, please use the chat box to share your experiences, comment on things, ask questions, and we'll make sure that we return to those questions throughout or at the end of the session. We will be recording this session. It's recorded now so that you can access it later. Josephine will send that link out. And then the last thing that we ask with everyone on now is that if we can take a photo with everyone to share via the Patterson Foundation social media. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask Josephine to do that, and to remind everyone to hold your smiles because we have a couple of different screens. So she's gonna take a couple of different shots. Josephine, I think.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I have to just close the chat box up. All right, I'm gonna get ready and I'll tell you to smile, then you can relax, and then I'll tell you to smile again. So hold, wait, sorry, the chat box is on again. All right, 1, 2, 3, hold your smile. All right, 1 second. You can relax, but one more. I gotta switch screens. Coming now. Chat box is on again. Hold on. So on this page, I have Kay and Jerry. If any of you guys that don't have your video on could possibly turn your video on just for the photo. If you're uncomfortable doing that, that's fine. I'll give you a second to turn your video on if you can. Jerry, if you can. All right, I'm gonna take the picture and everyone hold your smiles. And got it. I think there's one more page. Sorry, folks, there's a lot of us, which is fabulous. Nope, I'm good. I got it now. Everyone's good. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all. We appreciate that. And do be on the lookout on social media after today's session. We would encourage you to, if you're not already signed up, to follow the Patterson Foundation, No Margin, No Mission on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and No Margin, No Mission on LinkedIn. Please feel free to do that. You follow us, we'll follow you, and that'll be a good thing. With that, we are going to dive into the heart of today's Webversation. We've got a number of topics that we're going to move through and discuss. Larry and I will lead that conversation and discussion, and then we'll ask you to chime in as we go. We are not arriving with the answers today, but we suspect you'll walk away with some deeper understanding, some insight, and some value from these topics of discussion. So feel free to take notes, jot things down, or as Josephine said earlier, or Abby said, we're going to be recording this session so you can always go back and access it later. So without further ado, we'll introduce the first topic, which I'll turn over to Larry to share.
Good morning, everybody. It's early here in Seattle. It's 10 after 8, so I'm ready to go. The first question, the first two questions kind of tied together, so I'll kind of tie them together as I'm sharing. It's, can you share how other organizations are coping during this time? And I think all of you are coping in one way or another. And, you know, based on the last webinar, most of you are in between adapting and innovating, with a lot of you in innovating right now. But, you know, as things are changing in the communities, I know our state is shutting down again. I'm not sure what will happen in Florida, but, you know, you'll maybe go through the whole cycle again, at least go back to adapting. Who knows? So lots of organizations have made really significant changes over the past, 8 months now. One of the organizations, and I'll just highlight a little bit. Well, first, the second question, let me mention that first. How are nonprofit agencies innovating? And can you give a specific example, maybe with a technology bend? And I think so many of you are using technology now that you haven't used before in a lot of different ways. One of the organizations that we've worked with in Sarasota, the Neuro Challenge Foundation, for instance, had 40 trainings that they were doing in person, all of which have reverted to online trainings. That's just an example of innovation that took place very quickly. And I'm going to call on somebody right now who doesn't know I'm going to call on them. So Tom, could you please unmute yourself? Thank you. Tom is with the Literacy Council of Sarasota. Tom, do you want to talk just a second about how you've innovated with technology?
Right. Well, thank you, Larry. Tom Melville with the Literacy Council of Sarasota. And, what we do is we provide adult basic education, English as a second language for adults. And pre-Rona or pre-coronavirus, we were doing everything in person. And then all of a sudden it stopped pretty abruptly. And so we had to, adapt, cope, I guess first, adapt, and then we pivoted pretty quickly to online classes, both for small group instruction and for the one-on-one tutoring that we did. And even though those technologies had been available before, we didn't really have a need for them, before the coronavirus. And so we really had to move quickly in finding, the right platforms, getting our instructors and our tutors more comfortable with technology, as well as our adult learners. And we had to provide a lot of assistance in making sure that they had the technology at home, plus internet connectivity, and what boxes to check, and how to sign on, and how to respond to a Zoom invite. I mean, there's a lot of the devil's in the detail, but we successfully did that within about, I would say, between 30 and 45 days. We were able to pivot to online classes and tutoring, and it's been working out very, very well.
Great. Thanks, Tom, for sharing that. You didn't know I was going to call on you, but you're a really good example of how technology was a benefit to your organization. The next question is, how can organizations think about evolving to a new and/or different business model to survive and grow and thrive? And will kind of sound like a broken record, that you have to think about this from a mission-centric standpoint. What's best for the mission of your agency as you grow and thrive? And we'll dive more into that, especially on the webinar next Tuesday, where we'll kind of bring that work that you did, or that we provided you last week at the webinar, looking at how do you make decisions in a mission-centric way, and then we'll add in the economic-centric way next week and evolve that. So, we always think about evolving and planning and thinking about it as a business model. And how can you think about whatever that new idea is, doing a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats against it, and then also looking at what are the weaknesses and how do we mitigate those as we move forward. So, hopefully all of you will be at the webinar next week. We'll talk more about that. And that's it. I will turn it back to Mike for the next question.
Okay, good. Thanks, Larry. So the next question we had was, if your mission is to gather people and your organization is restricted from doing so, should you wait it out or change up what you're doing as you move forward? So there are many organizations who are all about gathering people, bringing them on site. And I know there's a number of you who are on here right now who have really had to grapple with that situation. What we have learned over time, over the course of the past 7 or 8 months, as this pandemic has hit and lingered, is that we have found it's best for organizations who can move forward rather than wait. The longer you wait, the more precarious you may find yourself, your organizations, as we move through this crazy period in time. Truly, there is no time like the present, and despite the fact that the present isn't exactly what any of us thought it would ever be, and also just to keep in mind, it's hard to know, what's coming and when this pandemic and its impact will end. I guess the good news is, there is a vaccine or vaccines on the horizon. We're all encouraged by that. So, we are certainly hopeful that things will get back to some sort of normal sooner rather than later. But we also are believers that, we may not return back to normal as we've all known it, or at least for quite some time. So really reimagining what the new normal is and how you, your organization, the work that you do can fit into that. So again, just every organization's a little different, but if you put your plans on hold or you're thinking about continuing to put them on hold, we say, really make the effort between you, your board, your staff to have those conversations about how to move things forward, mobilize, and really change things up based on what's needed in the marketplace. Next question is, how do we implement new programs and services so people aren't afraid to participate given our new world? So that's an interesting question, and it's one that, again, we have a perspective on, and that is when you think about your programs and services and offering them in ways that are going to make sense to your stakeholders. One thing we say is to really understand where your stakeholders are in this, I guess, continuum of cope, adapt, innovate, because that's important so that you can really meet them where they're at. To do that, you may be scratching your head and say, well, how do we know that? Well, we're big believers that if you can understand, or as best as you can understand, their needs, their wants, their fears, their desires, the better off you'll be in being able to tailor your offerings to them. SurveyMonkey is a great tool to do that. If you haven't used SurveyMonkey, it's easily available and accessible. You can tailor questions and actually e-blast them to your various stakeholders and get very quick and very immediate feedback. Our feedback survey that we shared with those of you who were on webinar number 1 last week was a SurveyMonkey, and it was very easy for us to get your feedback and then incorporate it into today's Webversation. So we're getting quite a good sense of where each of you are at. The other thing is, as you better understand those needs, really take a good hard look at what your products and services and other offerings are and start to match them up against those needs and wants, because you may be able to make changes, refinements, and modifications to help address those needs and wants, and to then get those out in a way that would be relevant and desirable to those folks. So that's a thought for each of you to think about how to morph, pivot, change products, programs, and services. The next question is, how do we attract volunteers and new board members during this pandemic? So you may, as leaders of your organizations or board members, have already experienced opportunities to do this. One of the ways that we suggest is to make sure that you don't pull back on your outreach. In fact, if you are looking for volunteers and new board members, now's a perfect time to double down and communicate with those folks or those prospects. People have time on their hands right now. We have learned just through experience that there are an abundance of individuals who are looking for opportunities to volunteer and to join boards. I think the key is to make sure that you can connect your mission and share your mission to find the right and appropriate people. So we like to talk about passionaries, a made-up word from the Patterson Foundation, but know who those passionaries might be out there and how do you go after them. Use your virtual communication, use your social media to reach out, to identify those folks and to ask them to raise their hand and connect with you. ask for referrals. So if you have current volunteers and obviously board members, who might they be able to refer? And the last thing is to be able to just talk to others. You know, the more that you can talk, the more that you can share, the better off you'll be in spreading the word and getting folks to take interest. Another question we had was, how do we encourage enthusiasm with our board members? So we've been in this crazy pandemic for 9 months, and many of us have not been able to have a board meeting on site, you know, live with your board members. So many of you have said, well, we're doing Zoom board meetings, and it's good, but it's not the same as being together and face to face, and and there's not necessarily that same connection. So again, through our experience, we've learned that there are several things that you can do. One is, as leaders and board members of your organizations, take every opportunity you can to share good news. Little tidbits of good news, big good news, and any other opportunities for good news. And if all else fails, there's ways that you can take news and morph it into good news. So, it's all a matter of perspective. Another thing, share progress reports. Progress reports engage board members, they keep them interested, and it also is an opportunity for conversation. So those progress reports, if you can get in the habit of sharing, a Friday progress report and just send it out to your board every Friday, that's a good thing, because again, you're communicating, you're keeping them informed, and it encourages conversation. Also, engage your board members. Ask for their thoughts, ask for their ideas, ask for their help and assistance. There's no better way to keep folks engaged than by doing that. And I guess lastly is, take every opportunity you can to communicate. We have Zoom and other virtual platforms. Love them or not, they are here. We're using them, and likely they're going to be here to stay. And just make the most of group collaboration and interaction. So that's a little bit about how to encourage enthusiasm with board members. I guess I'll pause for a moment. Is there anybody on the Zoom right now that is using any other opportunities to encourage enthusiasm with board members? I think I see Anne raising her hand, if I can call on Anne.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everybody. Good morning. So I am a brand spanking new board member at NAMI at the National Alliance of Mental Illness in Sarasota. So I am, I was inaugurated during Zoom era here. And so what I have done is I have personally reached out to everybody to, get to know them personally between meetings and see if we can speak for at least an hour on Zoom or kind of get together at lunch outside if they want to do that. Then what I've done is kind of share via Facebook some campaigns. And, I think the Friday good news is a great idea. I've tried to encourage good news within the organization. When the executive director shares media, I've tried to reply and say, critique, or if she's on television, critique and say good things and empower. Just a couple of things I do because we have some very exciting collaborations. And I think what Michael's saying is very freaking on it. Thanks, Michael.
Good. Thank you for that, Anne. Erin McLeod, I noted something that you put into the chat box. Can you share for a moment? Are you there, Erin?
Sure. We have hosted a Zoom happy hour at a regional board, and a lot of them don't know one another. So we hosted a Zoom happy hour and they really enjoyed it. So we're going to do more. And I had a handful of new board members that really, in normal times, they would be able to come and visit the campus and observe programs and meet with staff one-on-one. Instead, I set up one-on-one Zoom sessions between new board members or small groups with a program director to learn more about the programs and the operations.
Beautiful. Thank you, Erin. So truly embracing Zoom and using it to your advantage. Well, let's keep moving. I'm going to pass it back to Larry so we can continue in these questions and responses. So Larry, back to you.
Thanks. Kind of continuing in the whole board involvement discussion. The next question is, what's the best way to get the board focused on formalizing the mission-centric planning that's necessary to move forward? And I think, you know, a few of you just shared some really good ways to keep the conversation going with board members, whether it's individual conversations or not. But it's about keeping the conversations going, keeping the mission in front of them at all times. Some of you might have board members that are only worried about the financials right now, and that's the discussion they want to have. And others are only worried about the mission. It's kind of bringing them together and making sure that you're talking about mission every opportunity you get. And next week, we'll bring those two together in the webinar, so make sure you join us. The next question is, will we discuss ways to improve our mission work along the way? And I'll just say, next week, please attend that webinar, because we'll bring both of those together about how you can, and we'll kind of introduce a tool to you on how you can think about your mission and your financial matrix, and which ones should you increase, which ones might you put on hold for now, and we'll walk through that with you, but it's a really good tool. Another question is, essential for the mission and economics of any nonprofit is an understanding of the community's valuation of you. So how do you assess that? How do you think about that, especially during this time? And you know, it goes back to some of the homework that you're doing right now is if you're looking at your mission, if you set goals for yourself in your mission, how are you doing against those goals? And are you sharing any of that information with the community? And it's really important to do that, because that's how you find out if there's value out there, is getting feedback from your community members. So you set your goals, you measure against your goals, you share that goals outcome with your community through communication, and then you measure your communication along the way to make sure that you're getting the feedback you need from the community members. So measurement is the theme throughout what we're saying today. Measure what you're doing one way or another. Another question is, how will this process strengthen our organization to optimize impact? And I think, you know, you've been with us for a couple of hours now, or going on a couple of hours. You know that, and hopefully you're gaining some information that will help with that, and the tools that we will provide you along the way. So just keeping that mission in the forefront will help strengthen your organization, we believe. And, you know, as you work through your homework over the next week or 2 weeks and have those discussions internally as an organization, it will help you come together and think more about how do we make better decisions moving forward. We'll also have you look back as what decisions have been made over the past few months and how might we think about those differently as we move forward. So I'd like to open it up for just a second about, you know, somebody who's gained something over the past webinar and a little bit of the Webversation today that might be useful for you as you move forward. Does somebody want to kind of share at least one aha moment that they've had in learning? Maybe I can't see everybody.
I'm scanning. If you do, go ahead and post a short answer in the chat, and then we know that to call on you.
You're shy today. I will move on and turn it over to Mike.
Okay, so the next question is, how do organizations and their boards keep mission at the forefront of their work? What else are other organizations doing to keep a focus on mission? So again, through our experience, especially over the past several months, there has been a real emphasis on talking about mission and being very intentional about it during all the conversations that you're having with your various stakeholders. So again, whether it's with board, staff, volunteers, donors, funders, whoever it might be, leading with mission, remembering that that's the reason your organizations exist. So being intentional about that. Along those same lines, we are seeing that and suggesting that organizations put the mission on the agenda for every meeting, that you lead with that. It could be a mission moment. It could be a mission story. It could be it could be information or data, anecdotal information that you've learned along the way related to mission, but keeping that at the forefront. Along the lines of sharing stories, we are big believers in and have found that a number of organizations that we've been working with are capturing those stories that bring mission to life. So whenever they happen, whether you're the leader of the organization, a board member, or a staff member, when you hear a mission story, write it down, remember it, and share it with others. And not just a story that reminds people or reinforces the mission impact, but also stories that can illustrate how you've made a difference in somebody's life. So again, we're just big believers that the more you can keep mission at the forefront and deliver the message in a way that it's going to resonate with your various stakeholders, the better off you and your organization will be at keeping the mission at the forefront. Another question along those same lines is, how would you stay mission focused when your organization is financially stretched during these times? So, of course, this is a question that is top of mind for many of you. And what we believe is that, much like advancing mission thrivability is intended to encourage you to apply some rigor, some discipline, and a thoughtful and strategic framework to staying mission focused, that's what we would encourage your organizations to do. Take that rigor, the discipline, the thinking, apply it to understanding all your various programs, services, products, and other offerings. Truly dissect them to understand what it is you currently have and offer, to what degree each of those is offering mission impact. So again, this is very much in keeping with what we're sharing with you during our webinars and talking about today. And then also not just understanding what the mission impact is, but also how that connects to offering any economic impact to your organization. So that alignment between mission and the economics and the impact that the two of them can provide together is important. So again, mission absolutely critical, and thinking about and being very intentional about ways to utilize it and leverage it to your organization's full advantage. Okay, Larry, I'm going to turn it back to you. We'll talk a little bit about some communications questions.
So a number of you, as well as others that we work with, are concerned about communications right now. And the question is, we are uncertain about how to properly get the word out about our nonprofit. We believe the community wants to support us, but we don't quite know. So, you know, as Mike just said, over communicate at this point. They're wanting to know what you do. We've gotten word from some organizations that aren't directly human service organizations, dealing with people that are going through COVID-related issues right now, that they're concerned that the community's not or doesn't want to hear from them or isn't as engaged with them. And we completely disagree with that. If you're communicating with your donors, your investors, your community members that access your services, they will not support you along the way, right? They will continue to support you. Even prior to the Giving Challenge this year, we were getting messaged a little bit from some of the nonprofits that were concerned that the Giving Challenge wasn't going to deliver to their organizations as it has in the past, that people were going to lean more towards health and human service organizations. Not the case. Look at the leaderboard for the top 10 organizations. 3 of them were arts organizations. 3 of them, at least 3 of them, were animal-based kind of organizations. So it just goes to show you that no matter what nonprofit and who you're serving in the community, your donors, investors, and followers will support you if you communicate with them with what's happening right now in your agency. So communicate, communicate, communicate. The next question, is this a good time to reach outside our existing board and invite some fundamental discussions with community stakeholders? So, our belief is that there isn't a bad time to reach out and talk to community stakeholders. You should always be talking to community stakeholders and maintain that communication with them, whether they're donors, volunteers, potential new board members, those that are receiving your services. Again, it's measuring what people are saying about you, and at the same time, you can deliver some good information to them. So it's always a good time to have those discussions with community stakeholders. So, and the last question I'll talk about now is for those organizations that don't have the flexibility to shift their programming, what's the best way to get the word out? And again, we and I just sound a bit like a broken record, but continue to communicate with your constituencies. Even if you have one program or one big program and you have to back off on it a bit, let the community know what's happening inside your organization. Don't be afraid to share that, because in a vacuum, they will just make up their own mind of what's happening inside of your agency. So don't let that vacuum take place. Over communicate with them, and that will help you out in the long run. So I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Okay, so continuing in this area of communications, the next question was, how do we communicate our mission work better to our constituents? So a couple of thoughts here, again, things that we've learned through our work is A, make sure you know who your constituents and stakeholders are and identify them. If you haven't written it down, if you haven't articulated it clearly, make sure you do that. Because it may just be that there are different ways and or different messages that you want to communicate to your various stakeholders. And if that's the case, going through that exercise and being intentional and thoughtful about it will help. Once you've done that, I guess a couple of things. One, and we've said this before, we'll say it again, there's nothing better than storytelling to bring your mission to life. So to capture those stories and share them in as many places as you can. When you say, where should we share them? Well, share them on your website, share them on your social media. Remember, social media is free, so you should be utilizing those platforms to your advantage. Share them in e-blasts. So if you're using Constant Contact or another form of e-blasting, you should be doing that as well. And, we would typically recommend that when you are working on site and you have opportunities to share hard copies of stories, that can be a good thing as well. If you don't have the opportunity to do that now, then virtual obviously is the next best thing. Another important thing to consider here as you're thinking about communicating your mission to your stakeholders, remember to tell your story in a way that will connect with people. And we like to say, it will, these stories should appeal to their head. So, you know, I guess the rational, the information, the data, the outcomes is the head. Those things that will appeal to the heart. So how do you connect with somebody about your mission in a way that resonates with them from more of an emotional standpoint? And that's really important. Sometimes as nonprofits, we get more caught up in the numbers and the outcomes, but we forget about connecting with people at the, you know, sort of at the emotional level. And then here's another one, and the funny bone. So remember to appeal to people's heads, hearts, and funny bone. It's okay to be irreverent. It's okay to make people smile. So have you ever, you know, thought about ways that you can share that story from a mission standpoint by appealing to the funny bone? So if you haven't done that, that's an opportunity. Another thing, give real life examples. Real life examples. So the stories typically are real life examples, but have you actually engaged your clients, those people who actually have those stories to tell them? So whether it's through a testimonial, whether it's through a video testimonial, whether it's through a blog, again, there's many opportunities to think about that, but the goal is to keep those mission messages moving so that they are being delivered in lots of different ways to your various constituents and stakeholders. Okay, all right. The next question, well, this is actually, I think it's repetitive, so I'm not even going to share that one in the interest of time. It's really more about how do we offer up to our stakeholders new programs, products, services that emerge without seeming indifferent to the global pandemic. So again, communicate, 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 tell stories, and use Zoom and other virtual platforms to your advantage. Oh, here's a question. Is Alexander Miles Thrive More modeled after Michael Oxman? So let's see, Jerry Jones, is that your question? Are you there, Jerry? Okay, well, for those of you who don't know me, all I'll say is that I do tend to wear baseball caps frequently. I don't have mine on today, but I've already placed an order for one that has Alexander Miles Thrivemore right square in the middle of that baseball cap. So stay tuned. I'll probably have it on during one of our future sessions.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
Jared messaged, put it in the chat box that yes, that's his question. And he believes that that is modeled right after you.
Okay, well, I've had the good fortune of working with Jerry. So Jerry, I'm going to defer to you on that one. And thank you for asking. Okay, let's keep moving. So I guess, Larry, back to you.
Sure. I think for the holiday, I'll have to buy Mike one of those Mickey Mouse hands, you know, one of those big, yeah. So the next question is, what if an existing program, service, or product is not producing strong results because it's underutilized or conducted without a strong strategy to be productive? Can that still be elevated for action, but with the caveat of strong planning and goal setting? So many of you have programs, products, or services right now that have flatlined, maybe that are not being utilized, that are just not delivering the same results that you had prior to. And what we say is maybe some of those should be sidelined for a while, but how do you think about them and in such a way so you maybe can pivot them? And Tom gave an example earlier on how they took something that would have flatlined, pivoted it very quickly, and was able to keep his mission going and also keep some financial dollars coming into the organization. So we call that business planning. So how do you think about whatever that product or service or program might be? And how do you think about it from a standpoint of how can I take this product and make it mission focused or keep it mission focused and develop some revenue out of it? What might I need to do to maintain that or to grow that? So how do you keep it mission aligned? And that caveat of planning is absolutely right. You need to do some planning around that. So keeping it mission aligned, do some planning, and hopefully moving it from, flatline to how can we actually deliver that service, generate some resources out of it through some planning. Kind of changing gears just a little bit. There was a couple of HR questions that we got from people. One of them is, how much leeway do you continue to give an employee with COVID fears that's coming into the building, or employees that are aware of kind of that hesitation about coming in and being around people? And I will not pretend to be an HR expert. I didn't even play one on TV. So, but I think all of us have lived through this for 6, 7, 8 months now, and you're figuring it out. There's guidelines that you're following. And I think, I guess a message that I will share is, how do you give folks options along the way? Whether they need to work at home or whether they can't come into the office. If they come into the office, are they following the guidelines that are being provided by CDC? But it's about those options and making people feel comfortable about it, whether it's their physical health or whether it's their mental health. We have a number of organizations we're working with that have gone completely virtual, and they were concerned that their productivity was going to greatly be diminished at that point. And what they have found is their productivity has greatly increased because of that. And they're trying to figure that out. Like, people are working more at home and delivering more than they were actually in the office. What does that mean? That's an interesting question. I think some of us need to be around people and some of us don't necessarily need to be around people, in a proximity way, and we can still do our work. So I think it's just options. How do you give people options to feel safe? And as Mike said earlier, hopefully there's some vaccines coming in the very near future. So we'll be dealing with this for 5, 6, 7, 8 more months. So options is what we would suggest. How do you continue to build capacity during a pandemic when so many people are concerned about their mental health? So, it's kind of a message throughout this is communications. How can you communicate with folks? I do some volunteer work here in my community, and when every week we have a volunteer Zoom session, and there's a check-in on how people are doing. So I think, think about that from your board standpoint, from your volunteer standpoint, from some of your constituency standpoint. How can you keep touching bases with them one way or another to make sure that mental health is doing well and being maintained along the way? And some of you are mental health organizations. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I know it's helpful for me. And it's helpful for the volunteers that do volunteer work where I am doing volunteering to have that connection once a week. Because in some cases, that's all they're doing. And they get a chance to talk to people. So communicate with them, figure out ways to do that. Okay, I will turn it back over to Mike.
Okay, one more question before we open it up to the group. This was also an HR related question. How can organizations use this time to improve their staffing situations? For those of you who are looking at opportunities either to modify, change, or add to staff, a couple of thoughts here. One, again, based on our experience, really have a thoughtful conversation, be intentional between leadership and board to understand what it is you need, what you're looking for, or what's missing from your organization currently in terms of staff expertise and skill set. Once you've done that, look to write a job description for that position. What's the ideal position look like in terms of roles, responsibilities, and skill sets? And then to start to match it up with candidates who might be out there who would be able to fit the bill with that job description. I think one of the, if it is a silver lining, one of the silver linings through this pandemic has been that through layoffs and furloughs and those types of things, there is an abundance of talent out there. So if you can't afford to bring somebody on full-time or even part-time, there are opportunities to hire independent consultants and to give them an opportunity to engage with you on some sort of independent contractor type relationship. So with that, what we'd like to do is just open it up. So many of you have been typing questions into the chat box as we go, but if there's anybody who just has questions that are related to this conversation, please feel free to chime in. And I guess to Abby and to Josephine, would you like to call on some folks and then just open up their or unmute them?
Sure. So everyone, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to ask you to raise your hand virtually on Zoom, just so I have the order of the correct order and I see everyone who has a question. So to do that, you'll click on the participants button on the bottom of your screen. And on the right, it should pop up. And on the far right button should say raise hand. And if you have issues, raising your hand, great. I see a couple hands going up. Looks like some people are getting the hang of it. If you have an issue or aren't able to, you can also post your question in the chat. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to ask everyone, do those who have, Mary Murphy, I see your hand up. Are you practicing or would you like to ask a question?
She's muted.
Oh, let me 1 second. I think Mary, you're still muted. Okay, well, hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead and lower. Janet, do you have a question for us?
Yes, I think one of our biggest challenges is we've adapted quickly and we took everything, almost all of our services online. We went through virtual exhibits, we have online classes, we created an online studio, and that was really wonderful when we were shut down and all of our attention and focus could be on that. Now, as people are starting to re-engage with us, we now have virtually 2 methods of delivering services, very same, very tiny staff. And the new way of delivering requires a whole different set of skills. And so trying to figure out how we move forward in the future, being able to offer both services and bring in the additional costs without additional resources, which right now, just enough resources to keep going is really what we're looking for. You know, how do we make that transition? Because we're struggling with that now. As people are coming back in, we're now focusing more on our customers, which we need to do, and not so much on the virtual activity and promoting it. But I think there's opportunity in both, and could sure use some advice on how we progress with that.
So Janet, I'm going to just, I want to ask you a couple of questions on that, and thank you for sharing. I guess one question is the fact that these 2 ways of delivering you know, your offerings, are there ways to redeploy any of your team so that you can keep them utilize their skill sets, but perhaps in different ways? So that's question number 1. And then question number 2 is, we've been reading quite a bit about how organizations are having to rethink staffing as the world has gone virtual. They're even looking to bring in a resource who truly understands how to deliver virtual offerings in a way that really resonate and can be monetized. So just those are 2 thoughts or questions, and just curious to know if you've thought those through.
Well, we're using an independent contractor to do our virtual exhibits. And that's been very helpful because they bring that skill set to us that we didn't have, and it's totally elevated our services. It isn't cheap, it's expensive. And the question is, is there a way we can bring that in-house and be able to provide that service? Can we do it with what we have? Do we need to maybe find new resources of income, maybe different kinds of sponsorships so that we can keep that going? And we're just kicking all of these things around and trying to figure out the right way. And although I think we can probably manage it through the end of the pandemic, which in my hope is the end of next spring, we're starting to think about how are we going to be able to do this forever. And that's a whole different game. And so it's restructuring in a lot of ways, in a way that we hadn't thought before.
Right. Yes, and it's true. I think this is going to be the new way for certainly for a long time to come, if not permanently. So really, truly, looking at the sort of the approach for the short term, midterm, and long term would behoove you, and especially from engaging staff, board, volunteers, and others in these conversations. I think having the opportunity to brainstorm, to think, to talk about it with your kind of core team is going to be important. So, Larry, were you going to say something?
No, I was. I think, Janet, it's almost like you can't deliver two business models at the same time with the same amount of staff. So one might have to, using another Patterson word, smallify a little bit or balance itself. And I think, Tom, you're going to have the same problem when it opens back up again. Are you going to still doing all the classes online and still do the in-person trainings? So you just have to balance that a bit, where you can't keep the same size of both. One might have to get smaller as one gets bigger, and vice versa, until you have the revenue to build your staff up to deliver on both. So, yeah.
Thank you. That was helpful.
We have time for one more question. If somebody, Abby, has raised their hand for you to call on.
We do have Bob Donovan has raised his hand. Bob, do you have a question for Mike and Larry?
It's more of a comment, and Mike just addressed it. We've been going around the thing about, well, when this pandemic is over, when it's over, when it's over. Business has changed. I do a fair amount of research on the internet in Europe, and they're already saying that 70% of businesses in the entertainment field, for example, they're not coming back. Okay, they're right here in Sarasota and Manatee County. We can see how many restaurants and how many businesses have gone out. They were a source in the past of income to go to various charities. And I feel as though things aren't going to go back to the way they were. And what you talked about, Michael, I think is a very strong point. We're going to have to look at these. And Larry, your comment relative to we can't keep, with a small staff going in two different ways. We have a very small staff. But if we keep looking at more and more software, I guess you'd call it, or whatever that stuff is on the internet, that kind of ware, whatever it is, those programs are getting better and better and better. So a one-person operation, if you will, can have a farther reach than 5 years ago if you had a staff of 20 people. We're going to have to, watch our pennies more and be able to have a larger net. What I mean is like a fishing net to go out and bring in more, whether they be virtual volunteers, whether they be college kids that can't get a job and aren't rioting at this time, that want to pad their resume, and let them volunteer with us. And give them letters of what they've done for us that can go on their resume. That was my comment, that things may never go back to where they were. And if you look at the hotels, you look at the airline industry, yes, I see the airline stock went up the other day, but motels, rental cars, et cetera, business is not going to go back, and that's going to affect us.
Well, I think for us too, our business has changed, right?
Yes.
You know, we wouldn't have done this Webversation a year ago. We didn't even think about doing this a year ago. So it's like everyone's changed just a bit, and we won't go back to doing business as usual either. Well, let's talk about next steps. Where do we go from here? You will receive a registration for next week's webinar, I think this afternoon. If not this afternoon, tomorrow morning. Make sure you register for that. It's on Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern, same time. We will be talking about the economic centric and bringing that together with mission centric decision making, and continue that little bit of homework that we've talked about. Continue doing that homework. And I just wanted to make sure that you have December 3rd on your calendar, which is our last Webversation, or Webversation 2. And we'll spend some time talking about what the next phase of our work together might look like. So Mike and I both really appreciate everyone hanging in there today, all the questions that you ask us along the way. And we hope to see all of you at our webinar next week. Mike?
Yes, I echo what Larry said, and if anybody has questions offline, we apologize that we couldn't get to everybody's questions today. There was no shortage of them for our 1-hour session, but please feel free to email us offline, and we'll be happy to follow up with you. So again, thanks to all of you, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.
Josephine, did you have a comment?
Sure. I just want to ask you both, could you clarify for everyone when the discussion questions, the documents that everyone did from webinar 1, when those are due to you or when they should be completed? I received a couple of questions, and maybe there needs some clarity about it. When you want those completed is what I'm asking you to tell folks.
I guess we would like them at least worked on. Completed is kind of a relative term, I guess, but worked on by the time we're done with our Webversation on December 3rd. So keep meeting, keep talking about it. We'll dive into them a bit more on Tuesday. So it's a lot of work we're asking you to do in the middle of a pandemic. So we understand that, but
Good.
we want you just to meet as a team and to work on those. So hopefully December 3rd, you'll have a good draft.
Perfect. Thanks. That'll help them.
Okay, everybody, thank you for your time. Sorry we went a little bit over, but again, there was a lot to talk about and a lot to share. So take care. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.